Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Today, I thought I would answer for you several common resume questions that I receive all the time on just sort of best practices around writing. So I'm going to cover like 5 or 6 different questions. So probably the first one that I get most often is, how long should my resume be? And the true answer is that it depends, which is a horrible. Speak in generalities here. I would say that if you are right out of school and have usually about 5 years of experience or less, you should be able to cover everything on one page. After that, in my view, 2 pages is acceptable and powerful. It is very rare that I post 2 pages. I know some of my peers are okay with 3 pagers. I try to stay away from them, really even up to C-suite execs who have 30 plus years of experience, mainly because I sort of expect my readers to be a little ADD about things. And when people are in a rush and they see a document that's 3 pages long, I worry that they will say, oh, too long, and then just skip it altogether. So I would say, like I said, 99% of the time, I will stick with a 2-pager. But the cases where I might go to a 3-pager, or if someone has an addendum that they want to share, if they have a lot of publications that they want to include, or let's say they're an M&A and they want to sort of do a highlight of some deals that they did. So whenever there's an addendum in place, that's sort of the space where I do strive to, where I'm okay with going to 3 pages. But that really doesn't happen, in my experience, all that often. So I guess bottom line, 5 years or less, 1 page. More than that, try to keep it to 2. Usually when that question gets answered, the next question that follows is, how far back should you go? How in the world to keep something to 2 pages when you have, 30 plus years of experience? And the way that I achieve that is that I focus primarily on the last 15 years. So 19 now, I would say around 2003, 2004, I'm going to cap it off. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't include earlier experience if it adds value to your story and it directly relates to what you want to do next. In those cases, what I will do is create an earlier experience section where I will include the company name and the job title and perhaps a 1 or 2 line highlight that synopsizes the experience and sort of gives the reader a sense of what they were proudest of in that role. And then I'm going to remove dates from that experience. That earlier experience section does 2 things. Number one, it helps you to devote the majority of the real estate, your 2 pages of real estate, to what you've been doing most recently. But then it also it helps the reader to see that you do have some experience that does relate to what you want to do now. A couple of examples of where I might include an earlier experience section. Number one, let's say it's really important to sort of show that you understand an industry inside and out because you have done just about every role there is. I might show that you have sort of had a career progression across a couple of different roles to get to where you are now. Another example is somebody that I really want to show. I really want to show that their skills apply across multiple industries. And perhaps they've been in the same industry for the last 10, 15 years. So by showing an earlier experience section that shows companies that are in another industry, that helps to validate what I'm trying to say to the reader, that this person's skills are industry transferable. Another time where I am very apt to include an earlier experience section is when someone is trying to show that they are a leader and they gained a lot of their earlier leadership experience in the armed forces. So if they served in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, I'm going to include that in that earlier experience category. And then I'm going to allude to it at the very beginning in that summary section. So those are some techniques that I use to showcase earlier experience. The other piece the other thing that section accomplishes is that, number one, it helps with age discrimination. It ensures that the reader doesn't know if you are 35 or 85. And in my view, sort of makes you timeless. And then it also helps the reader to avoid going into what I call the rabbit hole phenomenon, where the reader will start seeing earlier experiences and earlier dates, and they start asking themselves, gosh, I wonder when that person went to school. I wonder if they have kids and how old they are. Just all sort of side nonsense that tends to go on in our heads, whether we like it or not, when we see experience that is earlier than the last 15 years. So I've answered how far back should we go? How long should it go? The other question I get is, should I position myself as being a generalist or a specialist? And hands down, I always say, position yourself as a specialist. Employers hire people for specific roles. Each role comes with its own duties and its own responsibilities. And employers or hiring managers need to know that you are qualified for what they need. What I have found is that people think they want a specialist, but then once you're hired, they're happy that you're a generalist, but you don't want to showcase that on your resume. When you appear to be a generalist or jack of all trades, what happens is that the person who thinks that they're hiring for a specific need can't figure out what box to put you in. And when they can't figure out what box to put you in, you're very likely to get overlooked. So definitely aim for generalist. With that in mind, then people always say, well, how should I customize my resume? Because I can do this thing or I can do that thing. Your skills are transferable into a couple of different roles. And what I say to that is that, by and large, your experience is your experience. And so that often does not get revamped much when you are trying to customize your resume. But where you can make that customization is in the top section. So above the experience, your headline, where you tell the reader what kind of roles you're targeting. If you want to say be in, sales, or you want to be in marketing, you can change your headline to say sales executive or financial services sales executive or marketing executive or financial services marketing executive. So you can make that tweak at the beginning. And just like a headline in a newspaper, it sort of sets the stage for what the story is going to be about. The other place where you can customize is in the top section. In the summary section that follows directly after the headline. In that summary section, that's where you tell the reader how you're a perfect fit for the role. And I recommend you tweak that based on the roles that you're targeting. So if you're targeting a sales role, you might want to focus on how you build pipelines from the ground up, how you turn around territories or build them from scratch, how you, your impact to revenues. Where in the marketing role, you might focus on how you craft messaging, how you are excellent in handling a crisis, how you create content. So that summary section, it solidifies that you're a perfect fit for the role, and it is really a great place for you to customize. And then lastly, when you use a skills section in your resume, that again, it's right. So you have headline, summary, then skills. That skills section is where you pull out hard skills from a job posting. And that's where you can also customize based on the role you're targeting. So if you're targeting sales, some of your skills might be pipeline development, territory management, CRM management. So things related to sales. But with marketing, you might talk about lead generation. You might talk about social media marketing. So those skills should again, align directly with the role that you are targeting. Okay, another question that I get often, and this is usually for people that, again, have a bunch of different skills and are not sure, and they want to showcase them all, is whether they should go with a functional resume. So the traditional resume is what's called a chronological resume, and that's where you sort of say, this is what I do now, and then you work backwards to what you did up to down, and the end of page 2 is what you did 15 years ago. A functional resume is where you list according to your skills, where you say, these are my sales experience. These are my sales skills. And then here are my marketing skills. And you walk through all that you walk through all the skills, and then you sort of outline your job titles. I cannot stress for you enough how much I don't think you should use functional resumes. They are confusing for the reader because, again, just like with generalist versus specialist, the reader cannot figure out what box to put you in. But more importantly, they cannot be read well by applicant tracking software. ATS software is designed to score it parses your resume, and it scores you based on keywords, and it assigns those keywords. It measures those keywords according to how many years you have had the experience. So if you don't have your accomplishments or achievements listed under each job title with the dates, you're not going to get credit for it on ATS, which means even if you network your way in, it's not going to go well when you apply online. So I definitely recommend skipping the functional in favor of a chronological. Sometimes I will use a hybrid format when I'm trying to showcase experience that happened earlier that aligns with what the reader wants to do. So I'll give you an example. I just worked with a client last week who had done a lot of nonprofit leadership work. But that experience dated back to 2012 and prior. And then since 2012 to now, she'd been working in academia. And she wanted to go back to what she used to do. She wanted to go back to nonprofit leadership. So what I did was I listed her nonprofit leadership experience at the top of the resume under a nonprofit leadership experience category, and listed each role with its dates and then the accomplishment. And then I had a second section that said academia experience. So I sort of broke it into segments, but I kept the functional. I broke it into functional categories, but I kept the chronological format. Another question I get is, should I put my hobbies and my interests at the bottom? And again, my answer for this is it depends. When hobbies and interests align with what you want to do next, or maybe they'll help to build the case for what you want to do next, then definitely make room for them. For instance, I worked with a client a year ago that was an IT manager at financial services, and she wanted to get into she wanted to work for a company that was passionate about sustainable food. She really had no experience working in a company like that, but she'd done a lot of volunteer work. She'd actually gone to farms and pulled crops and worked in a farmer's market. So we included those hobbies and interests at the bottom to help build the case for how her skills, while not in that industry, were aligned with her passions. And then I alluded to that volunteer work at the top of her summary, in the summary section at the top. The other time where I will include hobbies and experiences is when they showcase something that's important to your character. For instance, if someone's run a marathon, that sort of shows grit and determination, and I'll include it if I have room. If someone is passionate about fundraising and that's what they want to do next, and they've done a lot of 5Ks, but they've raised a ton of money, I might include something like that. So if I have room and when it aligns with what you want to do next, I'll include it. The last question I get all the time, and it's actually not related to resumes, but job search in general, and it's the last question I want to close out with, is what about cover letters? Should you include them? My answer to that is, so cover letters get read about a third of the time, which means 2/3 of the time they get pitched. However, when they are included, they can really make a big difference. So if you have time to make one, go ahead and write it. It can't hurt, but sometimes it doesn't help. So not a huge fan of upselling, but if it's something you have the budget for or you're a great writer, go ahead and include it. I make sure to always include some examples that sort of solidify why you're a perfect fit in that. And sometimes I'll try to include some additional detail that maybe I didn't include in the resume. That way, it doesn't appear to be a cut and paste of the resume. So those are the most general questions that I get. I'm starting to keep track of these. So perhaps you'll see a segment in the future that has some additional questions. Thanks so much, guys.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's skim online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.